Good morning, students. In this video, I'm going to talk about chapter 6, that is tissues. Here, we will focus on fluid connective tissues. So, let's begin. First thing is, what is this fluid connective tissue? Unlike other connective tissues where the matrix is semi-solid or solid, they are quite hard. Here, the matrix is fluid. So, because this type of tissues, they have a fluid matrix and its cellular components are freely floating in it, they are categorized under fluid connective tissues, also called vascular connective tissues. There are two types of fluid connective tissues. One is blood, another is lymph. In this video, we will talk about blood only. Here you can see this is a diagrammatic representation of blood where different composition or different components of blood has been shown. So the blood, which is basically composed of plasma, RBCs, WBCs, platelets, all these components are differently shown here. So these are the composition of blood, we can say. And when we talk about blood, what is this blood? A blood is an opaque, mobile fluid connective tissue which transports most of the things in our body. So it basically forms our transport system. Okay, if you can say that it forms the blood circulatory system, it also forms the lymph. So it is the blood which only forms the lymph, and a lot of functions are performed by blood that we are going to discuss little later. If we talk about its physical appearance, definitely it's opaque. Other than that, it is somewhat sticky and slightly heavier than the water, and it is slightly alkaline as well. When we say alkaline, here the pH is 7.4. 7 is a normal pH, and 7.4 becomes slightly alkaline. So alkalinity of blood is a 7.4. So it is slightly basic. When we have oxygenated blood, when oxygenated stands for when hemoglobin is almost 100% saturated with oxygen, that is called oxygenated blood. So oxygenated blood is bright red in color. But when we have a deoxygenated blood where almost 70% of hemoglobin is saturated with the oxygen and rest of the hemoglobins are free, they might be bind with carbon dioxide. So those kind of blood, deoxygenated blood, it appears little bit purplish in color. The particular study of cell is called hematology. So it's a branch of science where we talk about cell, where we study about cell. So this is called hematology. And if you want to know that how much blood you contain, you can measure 6 to 7% of your body weight, and that is the volume, or that is the weight of your blood. So blood by volume, generally 7% or 6 to 10% of our body weight is generally our blood. So whatever weight you have, you can calculate your volume of blood accordingly. So as I have already shown you the composition of blood in a diagrammatic representation, so let's just see what all the materials are present in blood. If we take up a blood and we try to separate its composition, what we see that 55% of blood via volume is nothing but plasma, and the rest of the 45% elements are formed elements. Formed element stands for, here we talk about the cellular component of blood. So blood basically consists of two types of components. One is its acellular component, that is plasma, and another one is formed elements, means its cellular components, where we talk about RBCs, WBCs and platelets. According to this particular picture, what you can say that plasma itself is composed of 90% of blood, and remaining 10% it has its plasma protein. Different types of plasma proteins are present. It also consists of immunoglobulins and fibrinogens. Other than that, it has dissolved ions, salt, and waste product, hormones, all such dissolved substances are present in plasma. So it is plasma which has all the dissolved substances substances, and all the formed elements are embedded in the plasma. So that is composition of blood. So let's just see it in little detail. So first thing is plasma. As I have already told you that it is the acellular component. That means it is not composed of cells. Okay. So plasma, it appears faint yellow in color, slightly alkaline and somewhat viscous in fluid. Though plasma is 90% water itself, as we have seen, but because of dissolved plasma proteins and the other substances, it becomes little more viscous than water. So viscosity of plasma basically comes because of its dissolved substances. So plasma by volume, if we talk about 55% of blood by volume is plasma. So more than 50% of blood is actually plasma, and plasma is the matrix of blood. So these are the things we have already talked about. What are the composition of plasma? Next component are cellular components. So cellular components, when we talk about, here we have RBCs, also called erythrocytes, WBCs, also called leukocytes, and platelets, also called thrombocytes. So let's just see one by one all these three formed elements or cellular components of blood. When we talk about RBCs, they are basically formed in red bone marrow by the process called erythropoiesis. So what is this erythropoiesis? The process of formation of RBCs in red bone marrow. If we talk about shape of RBC, they are biconcave and circular in structure in most of the mammals, but that doesn't mean it is the only shape. We have certain exception to it as well. But yes, in most of the mammals, it is biconcave and circular in structure. And you must be knowing that the mature RBC, they do not have nucleus in it. So they are enucleated cell. Immature RBCs, they had their nucleus, but once they get mature, they remove the nucleus and the other organelles as well. Why do they do so? So that they can accommodate more and more amount of hemoglobin. Function of RBC is basically related to the hemoglobin. So they accommodate more amount of hemoglobin so that more amount of oxygen can be transported. Okay, and by removing the organelles, they also increase their surface area. Did you understand? So this is somewhat about the shape. When we talk about size, the RBCs are smaller than WBCs, around 7 to 8 micrometers in diameter. So that is their size. A normal healthy adult, if we talk about number of RBC, normal healthy adult men, they contain around 5.5 million RBCs per cubic millimeter of blood, whereas a normal adult women consists of 4.5 million of RBC per cubic millimeter of blood. So that's about their number, size, shape and formation. If we talk about color, so you know that RBC consists of hemoglobin. It's a respiratory pigment which binds with oxygen as well as with carbon dioxide, and this hemoglobin, it consists of iron in it. Due to the presence of iron, the RBCs, they appear red in color. If you talk about a single RBC, they don't appear red in color, they actually appear somewhat yellowish in color. But all the RBCs together, or a group of RBCs, bunch of RBCs, they appear red in color. So that is a concept behind the redness of blood. And because concentration of RBC is far more greater than the other cells, that is why the overall blood appears red in color. If we talk about the lifespan of RBC, it is 120 days on an average, and the worn out RBCs, they get destroyed by the process of phagocytosis in the blood itself and in spleen and liver in particular. Spleen is also called graveyard of RBCs. So that's all about RBCs. Let's move ahead to the next type of cell called white blood cells. So white blood cells, they form in lymph node, and they also forms in a red bone marrow, spleen, thymus by the process of leukopoiesis. In RBC, you have seen that the process called erythropoiesis, because RBCs are called erythrocytes because of their red color, and this is called leukopoiesis. Why leuko? Leuko means white, no color, colorless. So the WBCs are also called leukocytes. The shape is rounded or irregular. WBCs, they do not have a generalized shape actually, and they are capable of changing their shape so that they can show amoeboid movement. And WBCs are the only blood cells, I should say, where they have nucleus. So they have nucleus as well as they have their organelles. If I talk about their size, the size is around 12 to 20 micrometer in diameter. So they are quite bigger, and number are very fewer as compared to RBCs. So the number actually varies from 5,000 to 10,000 per cubic millimeter of blood. So they are very few in number. If you have 1,000 RBCs, then you have only one WBC as compared to 1,000 RBCs. So let's just move ahead. Here we'll talk about the color. As I have already told you, it doesn't contain any pigment. Like in RBC, hemoglobin was present, but here no pigment is present, and due to the lack of pigment, they are colorless and hence called leukocyte. Their lifespan is also fewer. For a very short lifespan they have, it's around 3 to 4 days. And dead WBC, they also get phagocytized in blood, liver and lymph node by the other WBCs itself. So that's all about WBCs. Let's move on to the next one, which is called types of WBCs. So here what we have seen was the description of WBC, and next thing is about types. So basically we can categorize white blood cells into two categories. One is called granulocytes and another are called agranulocytes. So from the name itself you can identify that in granulocytes granular particles are present. So these particles make them granular. So there are three types of granulocyte. One is called neutrophils, another is eosinophils, and third is basophil. All their names has been given because of the kind of dye which can dye them, which can stain them. So neutrophil, it takes up the neutral dye, so the name has been given neutrophils, and it helps in phagocytosis. And eosinophil, it actually gets stained by an acidic dye called eosin red, and that is why the name has been given eosinophil. And you can see that they fight against the parasitic infection. And third one is basophil. So from the name itself you can understand that they get stained by basic dye, hence called basophil, and they produce inflammatory and allergic reactions. So any sort of allergy, if you have let's say at times if you have the allergy, so rashes comes, so all these reactions are basically produced by basophil. So they secrete certain chemicals like histamines and all, and histamines then they provide these allergic reactions. So these are granulocytes. And if we talk about agranulocytes, we basically have two category. One is lymphocyte, another is monocyte. Monocyte, they fight against the infectious agents, and monocyte, when it matures, it forms macrophages. These are quite a big cell with a lot of pseudopodia, and from all those pseudopodia they engulf the infectious agent. So that is monocyte. And a very important type of WBC is lymphocyte. Now lymphocyte, basically we have three types of lymphocyte, like B lymphocyte, T lymphocyte, and natural killer cells. So these cells actually they produce a specific type of immune response, like B cells. B cells they produce humoral type of immune response where they produces antibodies. So whenever any infection enters into the body, so it is B cell which interacts with them, get divided into plasma cell and memory cell, and its plasma cell part It synthesizes antibodies against those infections. And T lymphocyte, they are showing cell mediated type of immune response. And here this particular T cells, they just search all the infectious agent and then they take it to the B cell so that they can form antibodies against it. So T cells are very important. Most of the virus, you must have heard that they infect the T cells itself. For example, HIV, it infects the T helper cell, a kind of T cell. So if somebody have a control on the T cell, they have a control on our full immunity. So these are certain types of WBCs. Let's move ahead to platelets. Now, platelets basically they form inside the red bone marrow itself, in the bones, and the process called thrombopoiesis, as the platelets are called thrombocytes. Uh, Platelets are actually not cells, they are fragments of a cell. There is a cell called megakaryocyte. This megakaryocyte, they breaks down and they form these fragments which are called platelets. And because the platelets are not cell, so but obvious that they are enucleated. They do not have organelles, they do not have nucleus in it. There are different shapes of platelets. They can be rounded, they can be oval, they can be disc like. And the size, if we talk about, it is like 2 to 5 micrometer wide, so they are very small, and their number is lesser than RBC but more than the WBCs. So if we talk about the number, it is like 250,000 platelets in a cubic millimeter of blood. If we talk about lifespan of platelets, it's around 3 to 7 days, and they also get disposed in the blood itself by the process of phagocytosis. And if we talk about the functions of a platelet and the functions of other components of the blood, so let's just all together go ahead with the functions of blood itself. So blood, it is also called river of life, because all those important nutrients, all these important gases, they all are present in blood itself. And if the blood will not circulate in the body, survival is not possible. So it's called river of life, and each constituent of the blood, they perform different functions. So let's just go ahead one by one. First one is a plasma. So plasma is the major thing we have already discussed, which transport food, hormones, gases, waste product, everything. So the first function of plasma is transportation. Second is regulation of pH. So we maintain constant internal environment, which is called so that particular constant internal environment, where we talk about pH, where we talk about temperature, so this is actually maintained by plasma itself. And this particular process is called homeostasis. So maintaining the constant internal environment is called homeostasis. So homeostasis is also maintained by plasma. The other function, if we talk about, that it provides immunity, because immunoglobulins are present in plasma itself. It also forms lymph. So all these things are functions of plasma. And next thing is about RBC. So we know that RBC consists of hemoglobin, and hemoglobin has gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide. It binds with the oxygen and carbon dioxide for their transportation. So these are important gases which are basically transported by RBC. If we talk about WBCs, so they are called soldiers of the cell because they fight against the infectious agents, and they are also called scavengers because the dead cells and the debris which are present in the blood, it is all removed by the WBCs. And last one, that is platelets. So platelets, they are helpful in clotting, blood clotting. So whenever we have a wound, so its healing process, the clot formation is done by the fibers, and all other components are released by the platelets. So that's all about the functions of blood, and that's all about this particular video. Thank you so much for hearing.